Okay, hello, Charles. I don't know, have we met before? Have you been in one of our calls?
No, this is my first time, and I'm thanks to Eileen Eisenberg. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're lovely to have you. Are you from Chicago?
I am in Chicago, yes.
Okay, all right. And Serena, it's good to see your name, if not your face. We understand.
It's wonderful to be here again.
Yeah. Um, everybody wants to wish Richard much success in his excursion, his journey to the East Coast tomorrow, to meet up with his classmates in is it the 60th reunion, Richard? No, maybe he's not on yet. I think that's kind of cool to go to your 60th high school reunion.
Wow.
Okay. Okay, let's begin. We started this study of the book of Mishlei of Proverbs last week, and we spent a little bit of time on the idea or the tradition of Solomonic authorship. And we got into the text a bit. We got just a few verses into it, and it was time to end. But one of the questions that came up was about a word, mesharim, translated as equity, and we'll go into that in a second. But before that, I want to frame this study as I often do, that we study together. In this case, this is a mostly Jewish group. We often study together, Jews and Christians together. Um, uh, we study together to create common language, to create the tarbut in Hebrew, the culture of speaking, discussing,
Class now, dear.
and perhaps not like, for instance, many of us saw last night in the debate. And that's not a conversation. It wasn't meant to be a conversation. But what we'd like to have, I think, are conversations, whether we agree or disagree. Sure, it's easy to agree or not to strongly disagree about material which is in the book of Proverbs when a group like us who are very progressive and have kind of a critical methodology that a priori says we none of us know what the text really means, right? We can try with Hebrew, with looking at the context, with knowing a little bit about history, but what does it mean to us? And knowing that there is a built into our study is pluralism, is this plurality of views. That's the way that this has been designed, and thank God that's the way that we do this. But I'd like to think that we're giving an example to others to do this as well, but certainly for ourselves. The more that we do this kind of study, and again, Wednesdays is a little bit less so than Thursdays when we come with far more divergent views. The more we do that, we build this culture of in our own groups, but also in ourselves. And that's one of the themes that's going to come up today. What exactly is happening with wisdom literature, behavior modification, the choice between good and evil? All these are coming up today. And what is the path of righteousness, of justice, and of equity, as we're going to begin with right now. So this text study every week is done in the background of this horrible, horrible war which is going on in Israel, other wars around the world, the lack of civility here in our own country. And we hope that this study is also in many ways a prayer as well for things and for Kadosh Baruch Hu to help us improve things. So we're going to start with the additional page. Supplementary, I guess that sounded a little bit official, didn't it? Supplementary. It's the extra page. Hold on. Let me just silent die. don't know how many of you use the do not disturb feature on your phone. I don't, because I figure I should be available and I can ignore things. But on the somebody just recently taught me how to do it on my iPad so that I can focus on you guys. Yes, Serena, did you want to ask something?
I just wanted to mention that we did all chose to just be here today to to study on the anniversary of 9/11, and I just thought that was special to just mention.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I would have forgot. I'm sorry about that. I asked myself this morning in reading about the various memorials, I asked myself, why is it that I don't, that I'm not so motivated? And I'm not sure what the answer is. It could be because I was an Israeli at the time, and not that it wasn't tragic, of course, but you know, it's yeah. But thank you. That's absolutely appropriate. Thank you, Serena. Let this study be in memory and Lilui Nishmotehem, to lift the souls of those that were slaughtered on that day. Okay, so the supplementary sheet, which is just an additional sheet with expanding a little bit on this idea that Les asked about the translation of the word equity, because Les, if I remember correctly, you felt that was kind of a relatively modern, or modern is not the right word anymore, but a contemporary usage. Is something we use a lot in our language today, that I'm guessing Les was not a word that you used growing up in Arizona, right? Equity?
Well, what we've talked about lately is the difference between equality and equity. You remember the cartoon, I guess, of two children, one short, one tall, and they want to look over the fence, and the shorter one needs a higher stool so that they have equitable access to look over the fence. In other words, the difference between equality and equity. So I think that I've only heard that explanation and the use of the word equity lately, and I wondered where it came from in the text.
Right. So so that's how we got to the word mesharim. But of course, words in English, they also change their meanings, right? You know, it was equity is the same word is used in financial circles for something rather different, right? I didn't even look into that, but where's that coming from? But that's something we'll have to keep in mind. But let's see, in just a moment, I'll ask Ellen, we'll ask a question, but let's see after that where, where else that word mesharim appears. It appears lots and lots, dozens and dozens of times, but I just brought 2 or 3 examples, and also what some of the early rabbinic commentaries have to say about this. Ellen.
You know, I'm from the South, and this word equity has very uncomfortable resonance for me, because I think of separate but equal, which it never was.
Thank you. Right, a good part of American history. Okay, so Ellen, why don't you read again from the New Jewish Publication Society? That's what NJPS is. That's the translation that we use on a default basis. I did look up in the Blue Letter Bible or whatever that site is, and there's not really any interesting variations that I found. And equity was used already, if I remember correctly, in the King James Version. So the word itself was used, but not in the meaning that you're talking about, not in the cartoon's meaning, right? So let's try to get down to that meaning. So Ellen, if you could read for us this verse again, where it says NJPS.
For acquiring the discipline for success, righteousness, justice, and equity.
Right, and that translates the Hebrew lakachat, to acquire, musar haskel, which they have here as discipline for success. That in itself is a whole, we could have spent a half an hour on that. Musar haskel, the way it's used in modern Hebrew, is, so what's the moral of the story? You might recognize Musar, some of you know about Musar literature, which is ethics literature. That's something that developed in the 19th century, maybe 18th, but 19th century and 20th century. And there's a lot of presence online of Musar literature, but that's where the word Musar we already had in our text. We'll have it again. And Haskel, you may recognize the word in Yiddish, from Yiddish, Seichel, which is, brains or whatever, right? But Musar Haskel is here, discipline for success. And then these words what do you take, what do you acquire in order to get this success? tzedek, like let's tzedakah, righteousness, and we'll see a commentary afterwards from two medieval commentaries about this. Justice, mishpat, very typical. And then this word mesharim, equity. As I mentioned last week, the root of mesharim, for those that know Hebrew, is yud shin resh, yashar, like straight of path. Leveling, the way that I like to explain it, mesharim in this context would be leveling the playing field, which I think is the stool metaphor, right? The stool and the fence metaphor. Marvin Fox, which is Michael Fox. I always say that right. Michael Fox, which is this is the commentary that I use. This is how much for only chapters 1 through 9, right? Anchor Bible series, some of the best commentaries I feel have come out through the Anchor Bible series. Now it's together with it's been taken on by Yale University Press. And so he's really a lot of what I get is from here. I also use I know that these aren't books that you have in your library. I also use McCain. This I've had for many, many years from my university days, I think. So this is from the 80s, I think. 80s, maybe. Yeah, 80s or maybe early 80s. This is from the early aughts, if I believe. And I've got some other commentaries. I don't suggest you necessarily go out and buy them. They're a bit expensive. But if you want to really delve down into any biblical book on your own, let me know, ask me, and I'll be happy to give you some tips about which to get. A lot of these books you can get on Amazon used at very low rates. The challenge, of course, then you have to pay for the postage. If you know, I'm not used to paying for postage because of Amazon Prime. Anyway, what does Fox say? Michael Fox says here. Oh, and the advantage that Fox has in my eyes is that he has a really good command of Hebrew, of Talmudic sources and medieval Hebrew. He reads the medieval commentators at their source, as opposed to some of the other non-Jewish commentators over the years who didn't necessarily utilize rabbinic literature. Okay, so Fox says here in the next line, this is his comments after the word equity, right? Rectitude, straightness, levelness, hence equity and honesty. I think honesty is an alternate translation. So rectitude is not, it feels to me like, rectitude it feels to me like righting a wrong. Okay, I've got some problematic notes here for somebody. Okay, that solved it. All right. Okay. Straightness, yashar, straightness, levelness. So straightness actually would be like this, levelness like this, and hence equity. Okay. So that's a little bit about Proverbs 1:3 that we read in itself, in its own context. If we widen the context to a biblical Hebrew context, I actually there are a number of possibilities, but I brought two that I thought were interesting. And one is on what is Mesharim in the context of speech, of speaking. And here we've got this passage from Isaiah. Why don't you read Isaiah 33:12 for us? Oh, just need to unmute.
Okay. Whoever walks in righteousness speaks uprightly, spurns profit from fraudulent dealings, waves away a bride instead of grasping it, stops their ears against listening to infamy, shuts their eyes against looking at evil.
This is a heavily packed statement, right? Again, this is ethics literature, right? This is wisdom literature in the context of Isaiah and one of his prophecies, right? So how does it start with the person holech tzedakot, the one that walks in righteousness, tzedakot from the word tzedek, right? And also at the same time, not only walks, again, these walking here is metaphorical, right? So is speaking, even though speech is here. The truth is, they're not not only metaphorical, and this is the thing that we'll get to a little bit later as well, that Greenberg taught us about metaphorical language in Proverbs, mishalim, parables, excuse me, in the context of parables, is that very often it's about something that is symbolic, but sometimes it's the something itself as well. So when we say he's walking in the path of righteousness, we mean it metaphorically, but we also mean that person walks in the right place, literally does walk in the right place and doesn't walk down into the wrong place, right? And we'll see an example of that in the next section of Proverbs today. And then speaking as well, there's the speaking, which of course speech is so much of justice and equity. Except for it's not just the speaking. It's not just the speaking. It's also a metaphor for how you live your life. And here it's used, you speak uprightly. So here we're not speaking equitably. That maybe is not, that doesn't work. The way that the NJPS has this is to speak upright. So it's not just walking straight and leveling. It's also walking upright with, I think, with pride of doing the right thing. And then there's this long, or rather long list of examples, right? Spurning profit from, waving away a bribe, different things that make it. So here's about Mesharim, that same word that is translated in our text, equity, but in the context of speech. And then of course, Proverbs was talking about the individual's behavior in life. Isaiah in this passage, and there are so many other passages. I just brought these as examples. And Isaiah in this passage talks about the speaking and living in an upright fashion, but using the word using speech. And then we have of God. God is also the God of Mesharim. So that's if you could read number 3 as well.
It is he who judges the world with righteousness, rules the peoples with equity.
But this is a little bit different. This is not us doing equity. This is our belief that God has that sense of God embodies that idea of equity, which is not always easy to see, of course, but that's a belief in God, about God being good, God loving. If God loves each and every individual created in God's own image, then loving them with equity would make sense, right? Now, the world doesn't look that way to us all the time, perhaps most of the time, but still. So before we go on to see what some rabbinic literature has to say about this, any comments or questions or comments about this? Yes, Malka, Rabbi Malka. Just unmute yourself, please.
What struck me when you were talking about Devar Mesharim made me start thinking about it. Does Devar Mesharim mean to tell the truth all the time? Or does it mean withholding the truth about something if it's going to hurt another person? That's so broad and loaded. How do you unpack it for everyday life?
All right, so I think it's that's I love the question because that's exactly where I would go with it, which is in the background of your question. It doesn't necessarily saying exactly what is the most honest truth. It doesn't say truth. The translation here is not saying this has to be the translation, but why I like the translation uprightly is that it's not truthfully. Uprightly means doing the right thing, walking upright, being upright, and telling somebody that they're overweight. It happens to me a lot. That's why people who I've never mentioning to me, it's not necessary. I don't mean necessarily. Now, if my doctor says that, that's a different thing. But or the different things that people say to people, and they say, well, it's the truth. Sometimes the secrets need to be kept as well. This idea that absolute truth, and I see so much in movies and TV, this idea, but you lied to me, but you kept the truth from me. Well, duh. I mean, that's how social interaction helps. And there's different levels of parents and spouses and friends and strangers, but still there's a constant weighing of, I think, of what is upright to do. Not every word needs to be spoken. The metaphorical language or the metaphorical etymological game I like to play, Rabbi Malka, is this. The word for clothes in Hebrew is anybody? Beged.
Beged.
Beged is our clothes. A beged is a piece of clothing, and the word for disloyalty or for treason is also beged, bagad. the root of beged is bagad. So for instance, any accusation in Israel in Hebrew of those that are, let's say, against the war, or those that are for the war, or or not making a deal for the hostages, people will use the word ataboged. You're treacherous. Treason. You're a ataboged. You are somebody with treason. What is that? What's the word? Not treacherous.
Treasonous?
Disloyal?
Disloyal, yeah, but disloyal in a really strong way, right? Yeah, so taboged. You're a traitor, excuse me, there's the word, traitor. You are a traitor. You're a traitor to the ideals. So what's the connection in my mind? And I would imagine I didn't make this up. I probably heard this someplace else, but I have no idea where I heard it from. Is that clothes are treason, are dishonesty. Clothes cover up the truth. Now, it's a good thing, right? I don't know that we all want to have our truth hanging out there everywhere, right? But there is something dishonest about clothes, and that it's not the bare truth, right? And so that's why I appreciate your question very much, Malka. Yes, Rita Claire, just unmute first.
I just looked up the meaning of both words. Very interestingly, it came up as there is a difference between equity and equality. I thought that was kind of interesting. I haven't read the whole thing, but I would like to maybe kind of clear it in my mind. There is a little difference. What is that difference in the two words?
Well, I think Les helped us understand with the help. Did you hear about the comic, the illustration? Les, go ahead. Why don't you repeat what you said about?
Repeat it then, please.
Yeah, equality and equity.
So if you have two children trying to look over a fence,
Yes.
and
yes.
one is tall and one is short, if you want to be equitable, you would give the taller one a shorter stool to look over and the shorter one a bigger stool. If you were being equal, you would give them both the same size stools. And one of them, if you gave both of them a shorter stool, the shorter one wouldn't be able to look over the fence. So it's being treated equally, but not equitably to achieve the goal.
Very good. I'm sorry I didn't pay that much attention because I was busy reading. It's the story of my life. I've always had to have a stool.
Okay, there you have it in I would say in black and white, but it's in color. Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Wonderful. See how many things we can do by studying on the study via internet as opposed to in person. There are some benefits, right? Other than the fact that many of you are so far away. And again, thank you to everybody who signs in from as far away as Mauritius, as Corinne does, and in Maryland and wherever, everybody in Chicago. Okay.
I'm at least 2 blocks away. I'm at least 2 blocks away.
You're 2 blocks away. That is true, right? I think you're the closest to me right now. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our page. And Dan, if I could ask you to read from Midrash Mishlei. I want to do more work on Midrash Mishlei as we continue this study together. I have the book, of course. I've never done it from beginning, and I'm very proud of myself. I took on when I was younger, especially in my student days, and also in my rabbinic career in Israel, when I wanted to set aside time for study. I often would take a corpus of rabbinic literature and start it from the beginning to end and make notes, in the binding and stuff, which of course on the page, which of course none of them I can read my own handwriting, but I never did it with Midrash Mishlei. What I'm assuming, and we'll devote one of our times to looking to Midrash Mishlei, is an anthology. My guess it would be similar to Midrash Tehillim, which I do know a little bit more about, which is somebody in the latter part of the second half of the first millennium. That is, let's say, we don't know exactly, between 600 and 1,000. Somebody sat down and made an anthology of the different midrashic traditions and arranged them per verse. per psalm in the first 100 psalms, and then somebody added something from a different book because to make it the 150. And I would imagine it's the same thing about Midrash Mishlei, but I stress that I imagine I need to read up. I need to do my own research on that, and I'll share with you what I find. But for now, though, Midrash Mishlei, this is the rabbinic, arranged according to in the order of verses. Go ahead, Dan.
To receive the instruction of intelligence, righteousness, justice, and equity. Once a person has been appointed as a judge, he needs to understand how to vindicate the innocent and condemn the guilty. Alternatively, once a person has been appointed as a judge, he needs to understand how to scrutinize the law so that he does not sin and lead the world astray. For if he corrupts the judgment, he is sinning and causing the world to sin. But if he executes the judgment truthfully, he is found to be acting with justice, righteousness, and equity. What are these equities? Just as a person walks in them without stumbling, so too, if he executes the judgment truthfully, he will not stumble on the day of judgment, and the ministering angels will advocate on his behalf.
Okay, so a few things going on here. Any reactions? Who's the Midrash addressing, first of all?
Talking about judges.
Right, so not you and me, not all of us, right? That's different than what the biblical text is already. So that maybe tells us something about the Zitzim Leben, that is the setting in life setting of when this Midrash, this interpretation was said, perhaps in a handbook to judges, or in any case, this teaching is addressed to judges themselves. And what do they need to do? What constitutes this righteousness and equity, etc.?
So it's clear that the judges are being judged.
Yeah, that is that's the first Midrash in Ruth, I think in Midrash Ruth Rabbah, which is a collection of traditions, Midrash traditions about the book of Ruth, because the book of Ruth begins with the words Vayhi bimei shvot hashoftim, and so the Hebrew means, and it came to be in the days that the judges ruled or the judges judged. But the same words shvot hashoftim can also mean when the judges themselves were judged. And then there's this lovely parable about, one would say you have a piece of wood in your tooth. The other one say take the beam from between your eyes. The exact same parable that's in the Gospels as well, which that's for another day. But yeah, the judges are being judged. So okay. And
I have a question. Do judges in the biblical sense, the book of Judges and all that, is it the same concept that we have of a modern judge who's sort of steeped in legal whatever and passes judgment on disputes between people?
Yeah, so complicated question, because the book of Judges uses the term shofet in a very loose manner. Of the judges, the ones that you may remember, Ehud and Othniel, well, maybe you don't, but Samson, most people remember Samson, and Devorah. Whereas Devorah, there's one verse that says she's offering judgment in a particular place. There's nothing in the stories of Samson, which are the largest single unit in the book of Judges, about him judging anybody. His judge there is used as a charismatic leader, military leader. Ehud ben Gera is an assassin, right? He assassinates the Moabite king. There's no judging going on there. So that complicates the question. There are a few here and there tidbits about how judges should work, but there's no one. It's not like the book of Judges talks about that. You'd think, seeing on the shelf the book of Judges, that's what it would be about. Now, Maimonides, in his distillation of the Babylonian Talmud from Aramaic and Hebrew into his what we call Mishnaic Hebrew, the Hebrew which is the easiest for most people to understand and widely translated, he has a section devoted to judges and how they need to act. In the Talmud, there are various sections in how judges need to interrogate the witnesses. There's other material on how precedent is used, but the Midrash here is talking about a judge in the sense that we're talking about, somebody you come to for problems, for issues, whether there are, in this case, it would only be monetary issues. By the time the rabbis, right, after all through the first millennium, already the Jews don't have the power to put people to death. They're very limited in what they can exercise, but they were given to a great degree economic independence. Yes, Malka. Let's start with Malka, and I see, and then Ellen. Go ahead.
I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't. You have to put your hand down. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I don't know how the hand thing works
Yeah,
anyway.
I got it.
Ellen, did you want to ask them, or is
Yes.
left over from viewer? Go ahead.
Yes, so when we talk about equity, judging inequity, does this mean that the penalty for a rich person who steals something is more severe than the penalty for a person who is very needy, who steals something they are in need of?
So this particular midrash, I don't see that it addresses that question, a really good question. And I would say, according to this particular tradition, it sounds like not. Look what it says is you have to make sure that he doesn't sin and lead the world astray. That kind of assumes that there is one way to go. There's what does astray mean? And does astray change from generation to generation? You and I know, of course it does, right? There's always a interpretation, reinterpretation. But here it's more about the judge here. Equity is not being, I guess my point is equity is not being used here as it was in Les's question about it.
Mm.
Right? That's not equity here. Equity means in a straight pathway, executing the judgment truthfully. You know, yeah. So then look at the end though. Here's the actual definition according to this, which takes it down a very different road. Right? What are these equities? Just as a person walks in them without stumbling, so too, if he executes the judgment truthfully, he will not stumble on the day of judgment. So that takes it into a totally different realm of, you better be careful, because if you're not careful, you're going to eat it on that day of judgment. Excuse my prosaic language. So very, very different. That's really why I wanted to bring this. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know where you can get a Midrash Mishlei. If I find that I think I only have one copy. If I had two, I'd just send you one. But of course, it's all online, right? In Sefaria. You probably know that, right, Malka? Yeah, okay. Okay, so then Malka, go ahead, please. Number 5. Let's see what Rashi, right, 11th century, has to say about this.
Righteousness, justice, and equity. Righteousness denotes charity from his money. Justice means to judge honestly, and equity denotes compromise, the smooth and straight road, equal to this one and to that one.
So, Ellen, what do you think about this comment? Does that answer your question?
I think you could interpret this in both ways.
Yeah. But, so first of all, the smooth and straight road, but equal to this one and that one, what is that? Yeah, I don't know. But of course, the word that jumps out to me here is compromise. Yeah, I don't know. So good questions. And then Malka, go ahead and read number 6, Ibn Ezra.
Righteousness, including the worship of God as well as good deeds. Justice, judging between one person and another. And equity, that should be spoken by the judge.
Yeah, and I don't know what it means. I went over the Hebrew this is my translation. I don't really know what it means. I wish I did. I probably should have brought the Hebrew here for those of you that can translate the Hebrew on your own, but didn't really find much here. What I did want to bring this for is because of Ibn Ezra's understanding of righteousness here. It's not just about your interpersonal relationship. It has to do with praying as well, and God, and those mitzvot that are between God and people, and not just between people and people. Okay, any other comments about this page before we go back to our Mishlei text?
But just, I found difficult, and though we've been talking about it so far, it's pinning down the words. They're not tied in what we've read so far to specific cases, actions, events. They're almost platitudinous principles. There's they're lacking context.
Well, where does this appear in the book? There was an optical illusion today because we just drew out one person. But where is this in the book?
We're in the very beginning.
It's kind of part of the title.
Yeah.
It's not the title, but it's like in the preface. This is that section 1 through 7 is very much a preface. And although we did it last week, there is this yes, absolutely platitudes, right? And then, but also in order to get to the point at the end, now we're back to our sheet of Wisdom of Solomon, Proverbs 1, that you see, and if I hope everybody has it. I didn't check, but the text, of course, is sent out before, and it's also in the chat box. And the bottom line of that preface, those 7 verses, is that the fear of God is very much part of this, right? Whereas you could see wisdom as a secular topic, the book of Proverbs here is bringing it very much as a theological issue as well. Yes, Rita Claire.
I think I have just summed it up for myself, that the difference between the two is that equality to me is making allowances. I don't know.
I think probably I would think that it's equity that makes allowances. Equality, everybody has the same $50. The government gives $50 to every single individual. $50. That would be equality, and then equity might be, well, maybe rich people don't need to get that $50. I mean, I don't know, but why don't we leave that for now? I'm gonna.
Okay,
You and I, we'll continue this in our very equitable relationship.
Just to tie this, though, we talk about equality under the law.
Yes.
And that the judge is supposed to treat everybody equally. So I actually think that, at least for the purpose of judging, equity may play a role when it comes to sentence, but in terms of the judgment, equality, everybody needs to be treated equally. I don't know. What do you think, Rabbi?
I think that sounds right to me. I just don't know that, and this conversation is really important for us, but I don't know that all these distinctions can be put in that word mesharim in the biblical text here right now, in the biblical context. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, and look at that. That's a description of what happens. We hope, right? Yeah. Of course, what is my main source of knowledge for what happens in the courtroom?
CNN.
TV. Yeah, I don't watch Netflix. Or
Law and Order.
My mother loves all those, I think they're Dick Wolf shows. Law and Order.
Law and Order.
FBI and the fire department in Chicago. She's a big Chicago Fire Department fan. I think the station's called Ion. And that she just loves those. So, okay. It used to be, I'm happy because they're much more interesting to me when I sit with her watching TV than the British, than the nun who solves crimes in the little village in England. I'm less interested. Okay, let's go to back to our text. And I think we're gonna have to read, we did read 8:19. We got to the second half of it, but let's read the whole thing into context. And maybe if somebody will read, and then I'll stop you to kind of delineate the different units that I see here. So Megan, would you like to read for us 8 to 19?
Sure. My son, heed the discipline of your father. Do not forsake the instruction of your mother, for they are a graceful wreath upon your head, a necklace about your throat. My son.
No, we're gonna. Okay, all right.
What I'm doing?
And I think let's hold it there. Yeah. So a necklace about your throat. So that's the first kind of subunit. I probably should have broken this down. We did talk about it last week, just to say though that we'll talk more about father and mother. That's something for, we'll keep track of that. And also that wisdom is a piece of a jewelry, something that comes up also in the future. But let's go for now, because the main section, it starts with this, my son.
My son, if sinners entice you, do not yield. If they say, come with us, let us set an ambush to shed blood. Let us lie in wait for the innocent without cause. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive, whole like those who go down into the pit. You shall obtain every precious treasure. We shall obtain every precious treasure. We shall fill our homes with loot. Throw in your lot with us. We shall all come with a common purse. My son, do not set out with them. Keep your feet from the path, for your feet run to evil. They hurry to shed blood.
Okay, no, we're going to take a break here. So this section is about joining the gang, right? The social is like the Robin Hood, right? You know, or whatever it is. We'll pull our resources. All this, that we'll do away with all these suckers. They'll fall into the pit. The usage of here of Sheol and pit. That's why they're capitalized, because these are kind of ideas of what happens after death. They're taken from ancient mythology, Canaanite mythology, especially the pit, the boar. I remember, but they're in these terms. It just has like death. We've got it covered. Where there's nobody who can beat us. Be part of our gang, join the gang, right? And we'll pull our resources, right? And then the father says, or the parents say, right? Keep your feet from their path. Again, don't walk b'mei sharim, walk in the direct level path. Don't go on their path. Walk the straight path. And because they hurry to shed blood. And now the last section, Megan.
For their feet run
in the eyes.
Oh, in the eyes of every winged creature, the outspread net means nothing, but they lie in ambush for their own blood. They lie in wait for their own lives. Such is the fate of all who pursue unjust gain. It takes the life of its possessor. Okay,
a little bit unclear, a little bit tricky. Just a moment. Okay, is that so? What are the winged creatures? What are birds doing here? And it's sparked a lot of lack of clarity in the history of interpretation. Birds could mean so many different things. Probably means a number of things. One is that a metaphor, the symbol of a bird, you know, seeing that there's a trap for it, but still goes down for it anyway, right? Is sucked into this, knows that the bird knows they shouldn't do it. So what does the bird mean? Maybe dupes is one of the words that Fox uses. Children, suckers, not smart people, the people who are not following the first paragraph of the book of Proverbs. All these people, and these parents are saying to their child, don't be duped into joining them, as the bird would see that seed, even though the bird should know that it's a trap and goes in anyway. It's a little bit difficult, and you know, it's not entirely clear, but what I got out of this most was with the help of a term that was coined in the 50s in biblical scholarship, that this and other places by a guy named Koch, this is called deed consequence nexus. Deed consequence nexus, which is not the same as, but similar to tit for tat in simpler language. And this guy Koch said that's what the whole Hebrew Bible is about. So Fox and others would say, or McCain would say, that's not the whole Hebrew Bible, but there is this idea. What does it mean, deed and consequence? That there are consequences. I think we spoke about that word last time. And then somebody argues with him and says it's not really deed consequence nexus, it's character consequence nexus. And this is what I get out of it. The more you do something, and this is how I began our study today, the more we do something, we build a culture of doing it. It becomes second nature. It affects everything we do. It's a little bit like solve the conundrum of why does God harden Pharaoh's heart? Right? Pharaoh does something evil in the eyes of the biblical narrator. and then refuses to do good. And so instead of trying to persuade Pharaoh with the carrot, the stick is used immediately. And the stick becomes greater and greater and greater with each of the 10 plagues. And then finally, the drowning of his army in the Reed Sea. And because God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and everybody says, well, that's not fair. Aren't you supposed to allow for tshuva, for fixing one's deeds? And I think the best way to understand that, from my point of view, is that once you get involved with that stuff, your heart hardens. Is God doing it? No, that's the nature. That's what happens. And like the rabbis in Pirkei Avot say, mitzvah goreret mitzvah, avira goreret avira. A commandment pulls along another commandment. Well, let's use mitzvah, good deed in this case, and a transgression pulls along another transgression. This is basic psychology, right? This is basic getting used to things, and that's probably that's how I best understand the bird thing, right? Once they get involved in this stuff, they will entrap themselves into death and misery and punishment, whatever. Because everybody, as it ends, everybody who pursues unjust gain, it takes the life of its possessor, right? That takes their life. Yes, Rita Claire.
Okay, here I go again, getting a little personal. It says here, keep your feet from their path. It reminds me of something that we've told our kids. Bad associations spoil useful habits. Or tell me who you run with and I'll tell you who you are.
Right. This is from the same Torah. Right. The same book of wisdom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Okay. So then let's go on to 2022. Go ahead, Rita Claire. Read for us, please.
Wisdom cries aloud in the streets, raises her voice in the squares. At the head of the busy street she calls. At the entrance of the gates in the city, she speaks out. How long will you simple ones love simplicity? You scoffers be eager to scoff. You dullards lack knowledge.
Okay. So, reactions.
Pretty judgmental.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely judgmental. This thing about not being judgmental, that's not biblical, Les. Right. How about wisdom? How's wisdom described here? Personified.
Yeah, a woman.
A woman. Personified as a
There
woman.
you go.
No, and this is a really interesting question in the book of Proverbs, because Proverbs is a collection of different material, but in this particular, and we're going to see the woman portrayed in even misogynistic ways later on in the book. But right now, though, you had to pick. It could have been wisdom. The culture of Hebrew writing and poetry and thinking of the time could have had a word that was masculine. I don't think that's purely by chance. Wisdom is a feminine word, and that brings with it associations. I'm going to skip to the very end of the book of Proverbs. Did anybody grow up saying Eshet Chayil at the Friday night table?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we get to it's an not anachronistic. It's not alphabetical. There's another word.
Acrostic.
Acrostic, thank you. It's an acrostic poem, Eshet Chayil, right? It starts with Aleph and goes down through the alphabet. When you get to Tzadi, it's Sophia Halichot Beita. Sophia Halichot Beita. And there is no word in Hebrew called Sophia. There's Sophia, she sees. And the translation usually is, she sees everything happening in her house, that woman of valor. Sophia Lechat Beita. I read a wonderful article that was, I think it was probably published in the 80s. I think it was new when I read it, about how that's influence of Greek and Greek philosophy on the Book of Wisdom, which is why many people on the Book of Mishlei of Proverbs, which is why many people date this to after Alexander the Great, when Greek influence was in the land of Israel. And what it's almost a word play that the author uses, creating a new word, not from Sophia to Sophia, as in the word Sophias, Sophia, the personification of wisdom in Greek. So an interesting thing for us to pay attention to. A lot of things raised now, we want to keep paying attention to. How are women used? This reminds me of the Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings at a wedding. Kol sason, kol chatan, v'kol kala, kol sason, v'kol simcha. That may the voices be heard outside. That whatever it is, may it get be amplified. That's what I see in the second half of the first column. And then the judgmental stuff, right? Yeah, absolutely judgmental. You stupid idiots, right? I'm sorry to say, I don't mean you, but yeah. Okay. Ella, do you want
I have a question. Who is wisdom speaking to? The general public, or in the context here, who's the audience?
Yeah, so it depends. If you see this as a separate section, then it would be the general audience, but it could be that this comes right after parents speaking with their children. So that's a question that hovers above all of Proverbs. Who is the audience for Proverbs? Are these parents speaking to children? I keep saying parents, but the truth is it's usually the case of the father speaking to the son. But because there is mention of the mother as well, let's call it parents speaking to children. Or is it schools of wisdom for those that are growing up in the royal circles, right? That it's finishing school, if you will. Is it for judges in training? We don't really know, and probably different passages address different audiences. Here, I think artificially, we think it's a different section from the one that came before, because that's how I divided it, or it was divided in one of the commentaries I used. But here I would say it's parents speaking to children, maybe. But it is the general public. It's not the judges. It's not the way that the Midrash specified in what we did on the other page.
But still, it's a warning to kids in general, not to misbehaving children.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes.
Because later on it says, I just read the next line, you are indifferent to my rebuke, implying that no one's listening to wisdom.
I don't know to answer further. Let's keep it up on our list of things that we want to continue to check out. Who is it speaking to and when? Yeah. And also, less human nature is that, right? Malka?
The only reason I think it's not just a father to his son or parent to their children, because it says cries aloud in the streets, raises her voice in the squares. So that's everybody.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll take that. All right, why don't you read 23-27 for us, Malka?
You are indifferent to my rebuke. I will now speak my mind to you and let you know my thoughts. Since you refused me when I called and paid no heed when I extended my hand, you spurned all my advice and would not hear my rebuke. I will laugh at your calamity and mock when terror comes upon you. When terror comes like a disaster and calamity arise like a whirlwind, when trouble and distress come upon you.
Well, go ahead, read the next section as well. Let's take it all together.
Okay. Then they shall call me, but I will not answer. They shall seek me, but not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They refused my advice and disdained all my rebukes. They shall eat the fruit of their ways and have their fill of their own counsels.
And finally,
I'll keep going.
yeah.
The tranquility of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of dullards will destroy them. But he who listens to me will dwell in safety, untroubled by the terror of misfortune.
Okay, who's the speaker?
Wisdom.
Yeah, not God. It's wisdom. And God is there on the side. They're kind of hand in hand. But and that's an interesting interesting notion unto itself from a monotheistic point of view, right? Is wisdom almost a god, right? But wisdom is personified here. And speaking, yeah, I would agree really to everybody, not just to the misbehaving child. And it could be that the misbehaving child itself is only a metaphor for everybody, right? Because in life, your first teachers are your parents of these things. The word that continues to, I didn't point it out, but in Hebrew at the very end, ki mishubat pitayim, this pitayim, these simple, the simpletons, judgmental and looking down upon. Less absolutely, there's, but not judgmental, not just the people who have misbehaved, but people who are not smart, people who don't, or maybe people that don't trouble themselves to learn. Maybe that would be a way of rephrasing. Pansy, did you want to ask something? Was that no? Rita Claire, I think you've got something. Go ahead.
So you should only get what you deserve.
I think that's part of the justice and the equity that it's talked about. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There are consequences, repercussions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's an attitude of "I told you so" here in
Mm-hmm.
refrain, like "I told you so."
Yeah.
I told you this would happen.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Ella. Just unmute, Ella, please.
Okay, isn't it similar to the curses in Deuteronomy?
There is a lot of this. There is a similarity between a lot of this consequences theology, or what was the nexus of consequences, of character consequence or deed consequence. Yeah, that's very much Deuteronomic, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. Deuteronomy was, in many of them was, if you keep my mitzvot, then the good things will happen in your life, and that's the end of it. Here, it really delves into how bad behavior comes about, how you are lured into it by others, the different examples. But yeah, sure, and that's probably the same in so many other cultures around the world, ancient and modern as well. How do you teach people to be good citizens, good people, good members of the collective? Yeah, very much so. Okay. So, folks, this is a challenge. This class is a challenge for me because I'm used to teaching. Oh, I'm sorry, Ellen, you had something. Go ahead.
No, I just am very struck at the lack of compassion here. The picture that keeps coming up in my mind is of the adolescent who's so intrigued by their peer group and wanting to fit in and willing to go down paths of unrighteousness because that's what their friends are doing. And there's no hint here of the idea that they might outgrow it and turn back. Especially at this time of year, I think of Teshuvah.
Good point. But if it's a metaphor, though, for everybody, if just the parental child situation is a metaphor for human beings, humanity in general, yeah. Look at the custom in many Jewish circles is to study not the biblical literature, unfortunately, I would say, but the rabbinic literature and the early modern ethics literature during this time, leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. This behavior modification literature. Some people do it year round, but yeah, is to do it in this way. So it's different educational approaches, Ellen, right? Some people, it's about the carrot. Some people, it's about the stick, and some people, it's far more sophisticated. This is pretty simplistic.
I think about the person who has served their term in prison, so they have been punished, but they get out. And in our society, it seems to me the cards are stacked against them. I would like to see change in our system that truly enabled those people more easily to follow a path of righteousness.
Yeah, thank you. Les?
Well, but the last sentence is, but he who listens to me will dwell in safety, untroubled by the terror of misfortune. So it is sort of the, you know, unatona tokef, you know, you can avert the evil decree.
Mhm.
All right, so let's keep this in mind as we, and please feel free to ask about High Holiday Liturgy that as it comes up as we approach that time. As I began to say, this is a challenge for me. I'm used to teaching different type of text that has narrative prose in it. This isn't narrative prose, and so if any of you have some requests or complaints or advice as to how to improve the way that we're doing this, then please just let me know. For those that don't know me well, I think it's easy to, you don't have to approach me in person, you can just send me an email. But I'm happy to hear how we might make this, we might improve this group. But thank you all for being here today. I'll see some of you tomorrow, and may it be a peaceful end of week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.